we are the Curious Learning team for Just in Time. To introduce our team, we're being mentored by Patty. Team consists of Colin, AJ, and myself, and we now work on our very CIE program. And then we have Azim from MassArt and Dan from MIT. So we've been struggling with the concept of how do we make learning every day. Essentially, the essence of the project itself is how do we build upon this culture of learning and make it every day. You don't have to necessarily be in a classroom. You don't have to be in a museum. There are things every day that we interact with and engage with that could be sources of learning. So our questions are, how might we inspire curiosity in adult learners outside of the media lab through collaborative interactions? How do we promote fluid learning across disciplines? And that's sort of our model profile of the student just hanging out, that there are things that he sees that inspire his curiosity, and we want to find out what happens after that. So we created 3 profiles. Our first profile is a traveling professional. She has a camera. When she goes to, say, visit Yosemite, she takes a few pictures. She might have questions about a rock that she sees that's unique, about the trees, about different things in Yosemite. But all she's really doing is taking pictures, going back home, uploading them, and that's it. There might be colleagues from work. She works at NASA, so there might be colleagues from NASA that say, hey, I'm going next week too, and maybe I can find out a little more about the rock. But more often than not, either it's not happening or doesn't happen for another week or 2 weeks by the time it's stale news anyways. Second profile, international student from Japan. This guy is super pumped to come to UCLA. He wants to make the most of it. He wants to dive into the American culture. He has a to-do list of places that he needs to visit. Language skills are there, but he wants to also be able to practice talking to people and really polish up on his English. So that's the curiosity spark. Third is our Guitarist Scientist. So this really is the profile that we're now more getting drawn towards, where Albert is a wealth of knowledge that he's accumulated over the years, but he does not really like his cell phone. He has a flip cell phone. He was forced to use an iPad to communicate with his grandkids. He doesn't really care for it. How do we get Albert out talking to people, sharing the wealth of information that he has, and just learn from him, because Albert is not lazy. He wants to get out. He wants to prove everybody wrong that he lacks the energy now. And so he's still doing his trips. He's still going around and interacting with places, and the learning process continues for him. So if Albert goes to Yosemite, what likely is going to happen is he looks at the same rock that Amelia and the student looked at. He probably knows a lot more about this rock, but just looks at it, maybe draws a picture on his notepad, writes a description, goes home. His grandson visits him as a bedtime story. He tells his grandson about the rock, and that's it. I mean, that's where the engagement really ends. So for our just-in-time application, this is how we envision the flowchart, where it would be an application. We're still trying to grapple with, where it would sit or the different components of it. But this is what the interaction flowchart would look like in our minds. So there would be an interstack based on geolocation. It would connect you to people in your vicinity that are either interested in the same object or the same concept, or are experts in a particular field tied to what you're looking at. And really, the bottom line of this is, how do you put technology secondary, and how do you really make it simple enough for Albert to interact with people around him? How do you let somebody know that Albert's here, let's go and strike up a conversation with him? He could be a grumpy guy and not want to talk, but chances are that's why he's out. So these are our prototypes. This is what would happen, the tagging that I mentioned. This is what the interaction would go on given all of the current tools that we have. But like I said, what we're really trying to do is forget the technology. How do we just provide a trigger for these guys to start talking? So So we did some real experiments yesterday. They were semi-successful, but we went to the John Harvard statue. We asked people why they were looking at the statue, why they were there, what were they going to do after they take their pictures, etc. Then we tweeted about it, and these are the responses we got. Not surprisingly enough, everybody was obsessed with freshmen that pee on the statue. So it was less about the statue and more about the history, which is okay. I mean, any information is good information as long as it gets people to start talking about it. And we will definitely keep you posted on what happens in this conversation. There were a few contributors here. This was the second experiment we did with
You're kind
a
of running out of time, so you could either present more and have less time for feedback, or
okay.
let them respond.
Failed experiment, no tweets at all. So this is what we would like feedback on. How do we leverage technology yet keep it simple and seamless enough to encourage everybody to participate in just-in-time learning? I think the last point, we're specifically looking to focus on digital immigrants, because if we've conquered that segment, then we've conquered everybody else. The rest of us have iPads and phones, and it's a habit for us.
And can I just ask the Unteach group to start getting ready, because we are going to run out of time. But which you don't know, we're going to get kicked out of this room before the hour is up. Right? So
it'd be great if you'll just set up while we do the feedback. That would be terrific. Thanks. So our friends from IDEO.
Yeah, so I'm going to write down some more things. I love it. I love that you guys have shown what the experience will look like, and I get it. So I was like slightly scared when you showed the user diagram. I was like, what is the experience going to feel like when you started to demonstrate what that is? I think that the biggest question I have is how do you build awareness for people to either post to this thing or consume from this thing? So that's not an inconquerable challenge, but it's just a question of any network like this. Like, are you going to start tweeting is one way to do it? Are you going to start posting actual tags and notifications? And then how do you message it? So it's interesting. You describe it as learning, and the whole conversation was around learning, and that makes sense within the context of the conversation that we're having. I'm not sure whether people will view it as the value of it as learning, or even describe it as learning. They might describe it as something else. It might be sharing knowledge. It might be that we're sharing personal stories. It might be that I don't know what it's going to be, but that's going to be like a hook for people to actually get engaged in it. So that's not a challenge so much as just like an exciting opportunity to explore. It's cool, and as you first described it, I was expecting you to say like it's geolocated. Like, it all made sense.
The storytelling was really powerful, which is really good to be able to see. I was also a little concerned starting with where you were going in three directions, and I think you were able to tie it in together really well. It's really impressive you actually got the prototype done already, and I think it's one of our tenets is that iterate fast, that you give it a phase learning, and I think don't worry about the prototype that didn't have as many tweets, but there are definitely things that you did a really strong and maybe tweak the first prototype, not by so much that it's as crazy as you expect. I'd love to go more into what the second one was, but I think definitely like more prototyping is good. You also want to look at what's being done at the San Jose Tech Museum. They've done a lot of stuff with geolocations and this whole thing. They have these little tokens that people can take around so they can say they do it. So I think that's an interesting topic.
Yeah, I'd build on what Matt had to say. Is it about learning, or is it about sharing group knowledge? Is it about providing information to a totem, whether it's like a space or an event or a moment in time, or what are those things? So I think there's some work in framing what the offer is, and I think if you frame it well, it could make it very powerful. So something around the flow. One of the things that I was thinking about is, could you actually start with a question? So I think initially it's like you have people engaged and then you kind of work towards a question. But I wonder what would happen if you flip it and you start with a question. So something around that, and actually how do you build the energy around engaging in this platform? If you make a token of something, then you also kind of create you could create a void. So if you can create a void through your design, then hopefully people want to help you fill that void. So what I mean by that is, like, if you look at a Yelp model, you know that there's a platform out there that will get people to engage in getting their knowledge around whether a restaurant's good or not. Then when you start seeing the tokens in restaurants, like, you know, here's a sticker on the window that says, you know, people like us on Yelp, then that triggers this moment where you want to connect to that platform. And then when you see a restaurant that doesn't have that, is it, I want to engage because I want to get this restaurant upvoted, or I want to engage because, or I don't want to engage because it's not part of this sort of culture. So Yelp might be an interesting analog.
One other build on the analogs, and to reference David's more Hollywood description before, you can describe this as sort of like Instagram meets Wikipedia meets Google Maps or something like that. And the reason those analogs are interesting is not because you might go partner with Instagram, but if you say, if this was like Instagram, why does it succeed, might tell you why people would be interested in it. It might help you sort of develop your concept. So it's a provocation for yourself to say, why, if we put this on top of Google Maps, would it be interesting? Like, what does that give us?